I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Really.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. Would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
And during Open Studio is when I found out that Johnny Thornton wasn't just some random stranger who happened to live in Denver with the last name Thornton. I had talked with this guy several times. He was making Flint Strikers during Open Studio, and he must have said, like, hey, my name's Johnny. It's not like everybody introduces themselves by their last fucking name.
Yeah.
And I didn't put two and two together, but every week he would come in and talk to me about the biographers. And he was like, man, I'm so sick and tired of Diego Rivera. Or like, oh, this is so cool about Frida. By the way, it seems like everybody hates Diego and that I have talked to who has listened to the series. But then he was like, when I go over to my wife's house, all of her family calls me Cool Mayor Johnny Thornton now. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. And I was like, you're the guy. You're Cool Mayor Johnny Thornton.
Cool Mayor Johnny Thornton. That's pretty damn funny.
So that's been the running gag at his family's house.
So I did want to read something, and we'll get going in just a second here, but we had asked listeners who had been going through the Frida series, because we have been highly shitting on Diego Rivera, but we were kind of like, hey, look, if you have other thoughts, let us know. This is kind of, it's not our business or whatever, right? And somebody did respond on YouTube, actually, with, I thought, a very thoughtful and insightful comment.
Okay.
So this person, whose alias is Laura Sorkin. So Laura, if you're out there listening, or if you see this on YouTube or whatever, hopefully you're cool with me reading your comment. She said, thoughts on the Frida Diego dynamic. As someone who lives with multiple pain-inducing wealth issues, it's expensive and supportive care is required, especially after surgeries, etc. I haven't heard you mention that Frida had a source of income other than a few paintings sold for little money. She needed someone who could support her financially, especially when she was obtaining healthcare in multiple countries before insurance and or universal health care. As for Diego's sexual proclivities, if the discussion were of a man in our current era, would we consider sex addiction possibly exacerbated by something like poor impulse control or ADHD? Just a random suggestion to say that there may have been a disease factor and or mental health issues unknown at the time that today would provide him with treatment options. And that to me was very valid, where obviously I think we as a society... That can be a good point,
but I do think that there's a difference between a reason and an excuse, though, right?
I hear you, and although I am the person who, like the whole idea of, like, sex addiction is sort of funny to me, but I'm sure people who are in it are like, hey, fuck you.
Not funny to me.
This is not funny. Like, so it's one of those things that I go, okay, that's fair. I don't know about this. This is not my life. This is not my reality. So if that is what Diego was kind of going through, word. I don't know. It was a good food for thought that I was, something that we hadn't even considered or thought about. And then also the whole thing with Frida and the universal health care and all that kind of stuff. It's like, that is fair. I think my only response to that would be, I wanted Frida to be the type that was like, I'll be on the streets before I let some dude fuck me over like this. Yeah. You know what I mean? So,
but I think the one thing as I was finishing this last episode, the one thing that I really think got left on the table between my primary source, which seems to be the source, and my writing was the amount that Frida genuinely loved Diego and the amount that Diego genuinely loved Frida. Yeah. I think Frida definitely loved Diego a million times more than Diego ever loved Frida.
Okay.
Genuinely. But there was real love there. It wasn't necessarily a matter of convenience or, well, this is just my guy, so I'm just going to put up with him. Like, of course, you talk like that about your partner when you're really upset about them, but that's not necessarily how Frida felt. And that's like one thing that is just really hard for me to describe in the show, Because all I can do is hit these milestones of Frida's life, which were generally marked by shitty stuff that Diego did to her.
True.
Or did to their friends around them.
Yeah.
I mean, claiming that he killed Trotsky on purpose just so he could get back into the main party. It's like, this tells you what type of guy he is, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's very hard for me to, like... And we talk about it a little bit in this episode, but it's very hard for me to have any sympathy for their relationship as a whole, never mind Diego. So, yeah, I understand. I understand the point that, what was the commenter's name?
Laura Sorkin, I believe.
Yeah, I understand the point that Laura is making, and I think that is a very fair point. But in my humble opinion, maybe I'm being too harsh, I do think there's a difference between a reason and an excuse, right?
Sure.
A reason tells you why someone is doing something. An excuse actually excuses it, and I don't think he's excused from his behavior just because he has a good reason for it, you know?
I mean, I agree. But again, this is also at a different point in time and in history, and mental health treatment was very, very different.
Point.
So,
I mean, Freud was still their big guy, you know?
True.
Which we still got to do a biography on Freud. I'm considering it, man.
Ooh, that would be a good one. I have a
That'd
couple
be spicy.
that are in my sort of in my mind
He's
that
wild.
I'm thinking about after the series that I'm working on right now.
Big cocaine guy. Big cocaine guy.
I heard he was a big druggie. But anyways, hey everybody, welcome to the Biographers. I'm Daniel Newman, hanging out with Akiva Miola.
What's up, y'all?
We're about to get going into Frida Kahlo Part 6, our grand finale to the life of the artist. But just before we get going here, a couple of things to shout out. First and foremost, big thank you to Michaela Berard, our newest Patreon subscriber. Michaela, we appreciate you. Thank you for subscribing and supporting the show. If you want to say thanks, you can.
Oh, thanks, Michaela. Wow, I totally zoned out. Jeez. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I was just looking at my script like, oh, wow, we got a lot to cover. So
okay,
thank you so much,
yeah,
Michaela.
And we do have a lot to cover, so I'll make this quick, and then we'll dive right on into it. Second, just wanted to give everybody the very early announcement that on our next episode, the first episode or the next episode of Office Hours, I should say, after Frida here, we are going to officially be going live with YouTube videos. So we're going to be recording our session so you can see our, you know,
big,
I think
faces.
Beautiful faces. Akiva says big ugly faces. Yes. And I'm trying to prepare myself mentally for the onslaught of very mean YouTube comments.
Yeah.
So
just the one comment that says forehead, and you're gonna be like, ah, man.
oh, I know. You know,
nose.
Nice chins.
I know I'm gonna get that one.
Nice chins, plural. Daniel. I'm be like, yeah, I know. I'm a chubby boy.
But anyway, of John Mulaney, you're a little fat girl, aren't you? No, I'm not.
So anyways, everybody, yeah, you can watch us do our sort of YouTube thing. And because we're doing YouTube content, actual videos, my plan is to actually insert, when appropriate, images. So if we're talking about something specific, if we're talking about a picture or painting of Frida's, we can actually put it up on the screen so you can see it. So it's not just us talking. You can actually get some frame of reference for some things. Again, when appropriate. It won't be just like this, Ken Burns documentary, but, you'll get to see at least some things here and there. So be on the lookout for that, and that's the plan moving forward. We're going to have video content for all of our actual podcast episodes here, so you can watch those on YouTube. Next up here is just want to put out the idea. If anybody out there is an artist and wants to give a stab or has some ideas potentially for a logo, reach out to us at thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com. I know, Akiva, your wife has been kind of slowly picking at some ideas for a logo as well, and it is entirely possible that she finishes it up and we go, that's the one. There we go. Done. And none of you guys get a chance because Shalena is also a very, very talented artist. But... we don't know if that's going to be the case.
She's still working on a bunch of other commissions right now, so we would love to see what any of the listeners have in mind for art.
Yeah,
so.
We'd be very curious. And we've had one listener who did reach out to us, and I felt bad. She responded the other day and was like, it's okay, you don't have to choose my art. And I was like, girl, I'm busy. I just haven't responded to you yet. I haven't said no. So anyways, we'll respond. We're just curious to see if anybody has any thoughts or ideas of potentially what a new logo would look like. And we don't have a whole lot of money we could pay you, but hey, we would give you something at least, and a big thank you, obviously. Last two items, like always, if anybody else wants to be cool like Michaela and support us on Patreon, you can do so by going to patreon.com/thebiographers. And then obviously, if anybody wants to support the show just by giving us a kind review somewhere, we would appreciate that. Generally speaking, on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That's kind of where we see the most response. But anywhere that you get your podcasts, anywhere you're able to review, we'd appreciate some kind words as well. So with that, I know we have a lot to cover today. Let's get going into our grand finale of Frida Kahlo.
Let's do it. In our last episode of Frida Kahlo, we went over what I consider to be some of the most action-packed, dramatic events of her life. Having forgiven Diego for his affair with her sister, Frida loved her husband at an arm's length, basking in her own light more than ever. After a New York gallerist was enamored by her fantastical paintings produced in the late 30s, Frida was the new up-and-coming queen of the Surrealist movement. André Breton, the head of the movement, found himself in Mexico to support Trotsky's Fourth International, and Breton was so impressed with Frida's work, he encouraged her to come to Paris for an exhibition. Already feeling confident from her success in Manhattan earlier, she boarded a ship, but when she arrived, things didn't come together as she had hoped. Frida arrived in Paris to find that none of her work was picked up, she had no comfortable place to stay, and her art was denied by the gallerist for being too explicit. On the health side of things, her bad leg had only gotten worse, having grown over with infections on her sole, and her spine was in a similar state of disrepair. When Frida arrived back in Mexico, she would return to even more chaos. Diego, sour that the Fourth International wouldn't give him a position as a general secretary, would break ties with Leon Trotsky. Trotsky saw Rivera as an asset, but he knew better than to give the mercurial artist any real responsibility, so in 1939, the two broke ties and the Russian leader would move out of La Casa Azul to a nearby house in Coyoacán. As for Frida and Diego, it seems that distance didn't make the heart grow any fonder. Rivera would file for divorce with Frida that year, claiming that it was strictly for, quote, business purposes, but their separation wouldn't last very long anyway. Towards the end of Part 5, we discovered that Frida would find herself under investigation for murder when the ex-lover of hers and ex-comrade Leon Trotsky was brutally murdered with an ice axe in his own office. Frida was shocked to find out that the GDP secret agent who killed him, Ramon Mercader, had befriended Frida in disguise just before the fatal night. By the end of 1940, Frida was ill both in mind and body. Addled by the death of her once friend and physically broken from the pain of her spine, she decided it would be best to once again return to Diego's arms, and the two remarried in December of that same year.
The ice pick, man. Brutal.
Yeah, the back end of an ice axe, so like the flat side. Yeah. Wild. Oh, crazy that he fought it off, too. Like, it was in his head, and he was, like, breaking this dude's hand. Wild story. Was not expecting to hear about that. So, whether they knew it or not, the months following Diego and Frida's remarriage were, in a subconscious way, sort of a new, more somber honeymoon. The electricity of newlyweds no longer existed between them, discharged through years of familiarity and friction, but there was some sort of romance in 1941. Perhaps the seriousness of Frida's health or the assassination of Trotsky sobered them both into having almost like a typical couple a la mexicana. Frida, no longer able to fulfill the sexual role she once had, became almost motherly to Diego, fixing up his room with embroidered pillows and arranging the dining room table settings into new still lifes for him to see every morning. Diego, for the most part, played the role of a loving and hard-working husband, painting every day and mostly staying out of trouble. For a few brief years, their mornings were lazy and sweet. For breakfast, they would meet in the dining room, decorated in the classic campesino style, which is like Mexican peasant style, with tile work, simple clay plateware, and petate flooring, which is sort of straw mats. Right? Okay. Frida's pets would amuse them as they chatted, one of which was a parrot that had the habit of drinking tequila, who would constantly squawk, "No me paso la cruda," which basically means I can't get over this hangover. Isn't that great?
That's pretty amazing. I'm also wondering what their monkey was doing. What was his name again? He's like just an average monkey or something like that.
Yeah, Fulang Chang.
Yeah,
just any old monkey.
It's funny.
Diego's eyes weren't in great shape by that time, so Frida, or one of Diego's assistants, would read him the paper in the morning, and news those days was never particularly pleasant. For Diego, the early 40s were a frustrating time for him politically. Since he had sworn off the Trotskyites just before the assassination, the Fourth International no longer welcomed him. But despite that, the main party still accused him of being a sympathizer. World War II only made these tensions more confusing for both of them, since they no longer knew what to think of Stalin. With Trotsky alive, it seemed clear that Stalin was a dictator like all the rest, and Stalin's peace pact with Hitler made that all the more clear. But his defense of Russia from the Nazis was considered valiant, even by his critics. Even in the West, British and American forces would put aside their differences, momentarily looking at him with a more positive light, giving him the nickname Uncle Joe. I didn't know about this, by the way, but apparently there was like a sweet spot in history where they were like, oh yeah, good old Uncle Joe Stalin.
Oh yeah. And there was even a point
I didn't know this.
in like the middle of World War II when Stalin switched sides and basically was like, I'm not so keen on Hitler anymore. And then he became part of the Allied forces.
Yeah.
But even then, he basically treated the Russian people like cannon fodder and
100%.
just had them massacred to prevent invasion from the Nazis.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So this started adding a bit of confusion for Frida and Diego, who had this very black and white perspective on Stalin, which I personally think was the more correct perspective. Now with the lens of history, right? But at the time, they're like, well, Uncle Joe, so-and-so, defended Russia, so maybe he wasn't as bad as Trotsky made him seem. And to add to the confusion, as the war went on, the rebels that were supposedly killed by Stalin turned out to be alive, and they were fighting on the front lines.
Oh, wow.
So they'd be like these Trotsky dissenters that people thought were sent out to gulags or whatever, that ended up becoming commanders fighting the Nazis, and then Diego was like, oh, so they didn't kill him. That's interesting. And then now their opinion is starting to backtrack, and they're starting to, unfortunately, sort of lock in step with the main Comintern, right? Nonetheless, life in Mexico remained more or less the same for a time. Frida, now more confident in being her own person, spent a great deal of time out of the house when her health allowed. Her favorite thing to do was to drive their car down to the markets, often taking her sisters to look at her favorite vendors, which she kept up with like old friends. In fact, there was this one who made Judas figures, which are basically paper mache firecracker figures that you set off, I want to say during New Year's or Easter or something like that, right? They dress them up as like devils. It's sort of a mix of like Aztec and Catholicism, right?
Wait, are they the ones that you throw into the big pyre, like the big fire that's going on?
Yeah, you can do. They do that as well, right? But generally, like, imagine how like you sometimes burn effigies on certain memorials or whatever, right? It's that, but of Judas. And there's this one guy who would make them all the time for Frida. She like collected them, and then she ended up hanging them all around her house. You can still see him at her house today. And he had like lost a tooth, and Frida just paid for him to get dental work done, and now he had like gold fillings and all of this stuff. She really kept up with these like street vendors and street artists pretty well.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. The people who accompanied her noted that she was incredibly generous with her money and her time to any of the homeless that approached her. One even saying, quote, she loved them and spoke to them in a way that was a gift better than money. Debatable, but still, that's a very sweet sentiment. Frida had also developed an uncompromising sense to her when it came to Diego. For instance, Diego loved the symphonies and operas, while Frida was more of a boxing match mariachi type of person. So when Diego came to beg her to come along to one of his operas, instead, she would have one of his assistants, Emilou, dress up as her in disguise to tag along with him while she went to the pulqueria instead.
Because his eyesight was getting bad. That's awesome.
I think he noticed.
Do you? I feel like Diego is just sort of like, okay. Yeah, sure, it's Frida. Okay. Like,
that would be hilarious, though. I mean, hey, as long as she doesn't talk, who knows? Maybe he didn't notice.
Yeah, or if just like every once in a while she just like mumbles something angry, you know what I mean? The assistant's just like, that's stupid. Then he'd be like, okay, that's Frida,
Oh, yeah, that's Frida. Wow.
She hates the opera. That makes sense,
Where's my tequila?
Because I bet you Diego was sitting there watching the opera and not only more focused on the opera, but also just as equally trying to scan the crowd for other women that he could potentially bed,
look at that vibrato. Wait, no, never mind. The early to mid-40s would prove to be, in my opinion, the most impactful years of Frida's artistic career as well. Where once Frida was an eclectic attachment to Diego, or an interesting host in a line of other interesting hosts during the Surrealist movement, Frida had gained true individual fame for both her art and personality. She would continue her art exhibitions, this time visiting places like the Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston, the Museum of Modern Art, and Inés Amor's Galería de Arte Mexicana, showing off all of her work, right? The paintings of the mid-40s also improved even further in technical skill. Having already gained a heavy dose of the surreal, Frida had finally managed to include true-to-life details in her paintings, such as her portrait of Doña Rosita Morillo, painted on behalf of her son, Eduardo Morillo, who was one of her most prolific collectors at the time. If you want to look up Doña Rosita Morillo, Morillo. But in it, we can see the fantastical jungle fantasy foliage blocking out all perspective in the background, but Frida's command of color, shading, and detail work has reached a new level of precision, which she never really cared to employ before. Like, she's almost getting to a level of photorealism with a lot of her work, which is interesting because she like very decidedly did the opposite previously, you know?
No, it's definitely, you can see the steps up. It's interesting. It almost reminds me in a weird way of, not in the same style, but of Picasso, where everybody knows Picasso for his cubism and this sort of weird looking stuff. But if you ever see Picasso's earliest work, you see, oh, he was a master. Like, if he wanted to just paint photorealism his entire life, he could have, because he was that talented of an artist. But he chose to paint things in this sort of interpretive cubistic way, because that was the style interpretation that he wanted to do. It almost feels in a similar way where it's like the talent that Frida has is clear and pretty undeniable, but it's almost like she can pick and choose when she wants something to be weird and obscure and rudimentary versus highly detailed. It just depends on what she's trying to express.
Yeah, like she has now, that's kind of what I was going to mention in a later painting. She has such an impressive tool belt in regards to what type of style she can perform now. Yeah. Because she's had those hours behind the easel. Whereas previously, she kind of used that primitivistic style to sort of hide maybe shortcomings in her actual like technical skills. I'd say now she's like, no, I can make things crazy detailed if I want to. I can make things crazy, weird, and obscure if I want to. And even in that painting, Doña Rosita, it's like almost like a vignette around her face where like the detail gets insane, right? Like it's like super, super tight when you're looking at the actual face of the portrait. And then things kind of get a little bit funkier, a little bit less realistic as you sort of spread out away from the face like a vignette.
But it's like, I look at her hands and I'm like, oh, you can see the veins in the hands and stuff. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, it's great. So along with her newfound skills and recognition came new opportunities as a leader in her field. As her paintings made their rounds in a half dozen museums through the U.S. and Mexico, Frida was asked more and more to share her thoughts and expertise. In 1942, Frida would find herself to be one of the founding members of the Seminario de Cultura Mexicana, an organization founded by the Education Ministry to promote the spread of Mexican culture. In La Seminario, Frida would regularly write speeches, attend events, and even feature on radio shows as a representative for not just her art, but her country. In fact, there is one clip of Frida's voice that is yet still debated as to whether or not it's actually her voice that you can find on YouTube. I haven't been able to confirm whether or not it's actually her voice, but it'd be very cool to have, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Her journey as a representative would even have her taking the national stage when she was called upon to present for all of Mexico in their annual exhibition at the Palace of Fine Arts. As a result, Frida would create one of my favorite paintings she's ever made, titled Moses, which would win her a 5,000 peso grand prize, only awarded to 5 painters that year across the entire country. Moses, to me, signifies the distance that Frida had traveled technically, as well as proving her range as an artist. Upon initial inspection, Moses could easily be confused with Diego's murals, specifically Man at the Crossroads, but the themes, perspectives, and even execution is something entirely unique to Frida. Moses, painted only on a 24-inch by 30-inch canvas, was inspired by Sigmund Freud's final publication in 1939 titled The Man Moses and Monotheism. Really wild book. So in Freud's book, he was always really intrigued by like Egyptology. He comes up with this theory that Moses was in fact a monotheistic priest of Akhenaten, and the story of the Exodus could be interpreted that of a runaway priest trying to preserve an unpopular sect of Egyptian religion. In it, he posits that instead of the Israelites all leaving Egypt, it was Moses and his followers, and that after Moses' death, his followers fused the god Akhenaten with a volcano god worshipped by the Midian people. The book was completely rife with historical inaccuracies. Like he's like stitching completely different time periods together in order to make this like Akhenaten narrative fit. But like the true purpose of the narrative isn't just to like come up with like a spin-off theory about like how like Judaism came to be. It was more trying to look at cultural history from the perspective of a psychologist, right? Like he's like trying to see inside the mind of Moses, inside the mind of the followers, to understand why they made the decisions that they did, which is what's informing his sort of fanfic is the best way that I could describe it, of like mixing all of these different historical times to sort of make a narrative, right? It's a lot about like analyzing progenitors, like the leaders of new ideas or religions or thoughts, right?
Okay.
And he uses Moses as like a mode to go through that. Freud didn't want to take the story that we've all been told for face value, but instead he hoped to analyze the mindset of each character to try to understand their motivations and conclusions. And Frida, always a big fan of big intellectual books, took it upon herself to paint a masterpiece inspired by it, exploring the idea of progenitors. Her painting depicts Aztec gods, Egyptian gods, and Bible characters, as well as real historical characters like Gandhi, Marx, and the Buddha, as a host of creators of thought, people, and revolutions. Unlike her usual works, Moses is less of a work from within, plunging into her own life and feelings, and I really recommend for listeners to sit and look through it all. It's one of those paintings that you just like want to take a second to appreciate.
I've been looking at it, and it's weird. I mean, look, it's Frida, so she's going to be making some weird stuff. I think the thing that I don't connect with on Frida is it's like, okay, if you just show me just the left third of the painting and the right third of the painting, I'm like, all right, I'm with you. I'm seeing we got the Buddha, and we got, I think, Confucius, and then we got Gandhi, and then we got Stalin over here, and we got Jesus over on the right, and then weirdly, I don't know what Hitler's doing there, but he's over there hanging out.
He's still a progenitor, even if he is a bad one. That's kind
true,
of the point.
but he's right next to like Napoleon.
Because there's like the devil in there too somewhere.
That's true. And then over on the left is like a lot of the sort of Mexican or Mayan or Aztec art, and then over on the right is like Egyptian and Greek and all that kind of stuff. And then in the middle, it's like, and then there's the sun, and he's pointing to a bunch of things, and underneath the sun is a egg being semenized, and then underneath that is a baby in a womb who's crying over a baby in a crib with a third eye. And I'm like, Frida, you're losing me, girl. I don't know what is happening right now. Like, just transparently.
I want to explain it to you, but I also just love your take. I kind of want to leave you with it. But like, so the sun with all the hands, that's an Aztec thing, right?
Okay.
The sun god in some religions, and I'm going to butcher this for anybody who's into Aztec history, right? The sun god is like the progenitor, right? And very often the way that Aztecs believed is that life is renewed by death, which is why like blood sacrifices and all of these different things were produced in order to keep the sun running, in order to keep life going, right? And these multiple hands reaching out are like hands that basically take care of the world. And then like the three-eyed baby and all of that is sort of the idea of death and rebirth, right? And the progenitor is the person who executes a new existence, executes a new idea of thought. So like putting the birth as the centerpiece of the painting sort of explains that transcendental beginning of ideas, thoughts, religion, spirit, action, right? Like this is No, it's funny because she, even when she made this painting, she was like, I'm not sure. I feel like I need to read the book again because I kind of went off and did my own thing once I started to get inspired by Freud's book. So it's not like a one-to-one comparison to what Freud's point actually was, but she was just really like hooked on the idea of beginners, of progenitors, of birth, death, rebirth, the idea of like a new thing being formed, you know?
Sure.
A person or idea stewarding a new type of existence. So like the baby thing, and also Frida just obsessed with the baby stuff. Like she
loves fetuses and wombs.
Hey man, she loves. Hey, if Frida likes one thing, it's gonna be a womb. You know?
Yeah. It's
she's
to
wombs
be
maxing, as the kids would say.
Jesus Christ. She definitely features a lot of wombs that I've seen so far in her paintings, at least in some of the more prominent ones or whatever. And I'm also seeing like I think I'm getting like the we got Moses down here in the front and center at the bottom, and he's in a little basket, and then he's arriving with the papyrus leaves around the River Nile. Clearly, why Moses has a third eye, I think, is because he could see things that other people couldn't see things. He was talking to God or something like that.
Yes,
but it is very cool to look at. I think that in general, like many people, there's a dividing line with Frida and her art. It's like either you see it and go like, wow, or you see it and go, cool, but what am I actually looking at right now?
I think I have the benefit of reading a book about it, because if I just saw Moses, I wouldn't be like, the progenitor. I'd be like, there's a lot of guys in here. You know?
Why do you have Moses and Hitler in the same painting? I don't really get this.
Like, this feels wrong, right? Everybody agrees this is wrong. Yeah.
Anyway.
So, yeah, like, I think Frida, unfortunately, I feel like her art sometimes, at least for me, requires explanation. Maybe I'm just not smart enough or fancy artsy enough to, like, just get it off the dome. But with the explanation, I find her art to be very fascinating. Right?
Yeah, and it's funny because I was just talking to my buddy Clinton about this, and I was saying that we're going through this series on Frida, and he was like, oh, I'm really excited because I think it was not that long ago, he went to like a Frida exhibition and he saw all this different art, and his exact reaction was mine. He was like looking through it and going, what am I actually looking at right now? This is really very strange. You know, he's like, I'm not saying she's not like a talented painter, but it's just very like
what is this?
It's not connecting with me. I don't really get any of it, kind of a thing. And my exact comment, I was like, well, I feel like I'm the same way, but then Akiva will explain it to me and I go, oh, that's cool. You know, like
yes.
I think about the one of her in the bed with the snail that's connected to her and stuff. And it's like,
like I would have never understood the snail thing if
right, why is there a
snail
snail in there? Like,
like I get the fetus, but what's the snail doing here? It's so funny. Yeah.
But it needs an explanation. I do actually think that with Frida, maybe I'm just not enough of an art head to see it and go, oh, I get it. I get what you're saying or whatever.
I honestly, part of me, it's like, you know how you were saying I'm a very serious artist, wink?
Yeah.
I feel like kind of Frida continues that tradition in the fact that she's like, I can't wait for these art people to try to figure out what I'm saying here. Like, I can't wait to just like hide in the background and listen, and somebody's like, well, the snail obviously is her mother because, you know, a snail slime mother, you know, that's obviously what, and she's just like laughing in the background. Like, you know,
okay,
like I feel like there's a slight bit of that as well, right?
I could see that for sure.
So yeah, it's a great painting. It's crazy how small it is too, 20 by 30. It looks like one of Diego's murals.
That is small.
It was pretty cool. So
very cool.
And with Frida's newfound clout came a new job that would give her new meaning to her life. In 1943, Frida would accept a position at La Escuela Nacional de Pintura y Escultura y Grabado, otherwise called La Esmeralda. That's right, over 20 years after Frida started riding donkeys through classrooms and setting off fireworks at La Preparatoria, she became a teacher herself. And a damn good one, in my opinion. Kind of wild, right? Frida never lost touch with her cachucha spirit, and her students experienced an education that was truly unique. There was no way in hell that Frida was going to find herself being the boring, didactic professor of her childhood, and reaching her late 30s with no children gave her a love for her students that was almost motherly. Frida writes about her first few weeks, quote, Diego got me a job as a drawing teacher, and I lay on the floor on my stomach with all the boys on their bellies too. As we drew, I said to them, Don't copy anymore. Paint your houses, your mothers, your brothers, the bus, things that happen. We played marbles and spun tops, and I became a better and better friend of theirs.
I'm imagining, week 2, like, class, what we have on my desk here is a basket full of puppies. Next to the puppies is a basket of fireworks. If you want the puppies to successfully be exploded by the fireworks, you need to attach them both to the tail and to the neck. Like,
now go, little children.
This is the spirit of a rebel. Go light these dogs on fire. It's like, Jesus. I can't get over it. I can't get over her as a kid putting fireworks on a dog. It makes me too sad.
It's like, today we are painting a snail, an avocado, an exploded human being, a fruit that I don't know the name of, and a big leaf. Make this about your mother.
If you can throw a womb in there, extra credit.
Extra credit for the best womb painting. I'm big into wombs. If we did have merch, we could have a t-shirt that says I'm big into wombs and just a picture of Frida.
That would be good. I feel like we should start writing these down.
I know, right?
I also think that would be the best type of merch is like these weird insights into
Inside
history.
jokes. Yeah,
where
people just... Yeah.
they would wear them and then people would go, what does this mean? And it would actually spark the conversation where somebody would go, so Frida, if you listen to this show, you explain all about her life. And one of the things she was just super into in her paintings was wombs. And then all of a sudden, now they're actually pitching our show to somebody for us. So,
there we go. All right, our new scheme. So originally she was teaching 3 12-hour days a week at around 250 pesos a day. And Frida's goal wasn't simply to instruct painters. She wanted to raise creative minds so openly, so aware that they couldn't help but express themselves through personal art. La Esmeralda, like Frida's own school as a child, was funded and supported by progressives and communists, and as a result, tuition and school supplies were free, and most of her pupils were poor children who would have been forced to work otherwise.
Wow.
It's really cool, right? Her initial impression among her students was a bit polarizing, since, like her art, Frida was constantly downplaying her own skills. For instance, one of her longtime students, Fanny Rabel, recalls her first meeting with Frida, quote, "It is an old vice of women not to have confidence in women. Almost everything in Mexico was managed by the masculine gender. But the moment I met Frida, she had the gift to fascinate people. She was unique. She had enormous alegría, spirit, humor, and a love of life. The first thing she did when I met her was to say, 'Oh, you are one of the muchachitas here. You're going to be my student. Listen, how do you do this thing of giving classes? I don't know. What's it about? I don't have the slightest idea how to teach, but I think it's going to be all right.'" The best account, however, comes from her student Monroy, who so perfectly puts together what it was like in her classes. So I'm going to let him take this next part. Quote, "She chatted with us briefly after greeting us very affectionately, and then immediately told us in an animated way, 'Well, kids, let's go to work. I will be your so-called teacher. I'm not any such thing. I only want to be your friend. I have never been a painting teacher, nor do I think I will ever be, since I am always learning. It is certain that to paint is the most terrific thing that there is, but to do so well is very difficult. It's necessary to learn the skill very well, to have a strict self-discipline, and above all, to have love, to feel a great love for painting. Once and for all, I am going to tell you that if the little experience that I have as a painter is helpful to you in any way, you will tell me so. With me, you will paint everything you want and feel. I will try to understand you the best I can. From time to time, I will make observations about your work, but I ask you as the cuates that we are, which are like pals, when I show you mine, you will do the same. I will never take the pencil from you in order to correct you. I want you to know, dear children, that there does not exist in the whole world a single teacher who is capable of teaching art. To do that is truly impossible.'" Frida's curriculum was completely, beautifully unstructured, but that didn't mean her students were left to fend for themselves. Frida's remarks towards their work came off more like a professional talking to a colleague, with few comments of, "A little darker here," or "This sign seems a bit uglier than the rest." But all of her critique was prompted that it was her opinion first and foremost, with Frida often saying, quote, "If it's helpful to you, take it. If not, leave it." which I like because I say that to my students. Like I like give them a tip, like, oh, hold it like this. I'm like, if it works for you, awesome. If not, throw it away. You know,
I just love the sentiment of there's no such thing as an art teacher, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody can actually teach you art. It's sort of like, there are certain skills for techniques that can be taught, but it's like to actually teach art is its own, like you kind of have to discover that for yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's really cool.
And at a time where technical skill isn't as appreciated as expression and creativity, this I think was like the most necessary sort of information for these students to learn, because it's so easy for anybody who's tried art or a different skill to be completely squashed by learning the technique that you have now crushed yourself out of being able to be creative. That's why, like, in Spanish, like there's an old saying that if you want the truth, you either ask a crazy person or a child, right? Because a person who has an unstructured way of thinking can produce really creative stuff. And she's like, I want to teach you how to use a brush. I want to teach you how to put colors together. But oh my goodness, do I not want to touch any of your creativity, right? Like that is the opposite of what I want to do, which I really like. Like I would have, as a former ADHD gifted kid myself, I would have loved being in Frida's class. Like, sure. I bet you we would have gotten along splendidly there, right?
I'm curious, maybe you'll get into this in a few minutes or something like that. Did anybody come out of her teachings as somebody that we might know?
Not somebody that we might know, but definitely famous artists. Like Fanny Rebel, she had a really successful career as an artist. Most of the and we'll talk about why, but only a handful of her students managed to actually like complete their coursework with Frida the entire time. But those who did ended up having a successful life as an artist outside of her. And what's amazing is if you look at their art, it doesn't really look like Frida's. Like there's not a lot of her imparting that. Like there's a mural that her students do a little bit later. And if you look at it, there's like a Mexican style to it because, they are trying to teach about Mexican art and culture, but there's not a Frida style to it.
Okay.
Versus like Diego students were like much more like, you will paint like this,
Interesting. Okay.
It was very rare that Frida kept her students who called themselves the Fridos. That's right. Her students called themselves Fridos, which I love. But she never kept them entirely in the classroom at La Esmeralda. Instead, taking them out onto the streets, the forests, and even the ancient pyramids to observe, inspire, and paint the world around them. In fact, Frida would even go out of her way to secure the Fridos a public art opportunity. In one instance, her class was given the opportunity to decorate a nearby pulqueria with a mural spanning all across the building. Do you know what a pulqueria is, by the way?
I was just about to ask.
Okay, so pulque is like a sweeter, less alcoholic agave drink, and a pulqueria is to Mexico as a pub is to England, right? Okay. It's like a community area. It's often where like music is played, where people hang out. It's more than just like you go there to get food and drink. It's like a hub, right?
Gotcha.
And pulquerias are famous for murals, right? Like you go into a lot of pulquerias, there's like all sorts of different murals and themes, and like generally, if you're at a traditional one, there's not like a square inch of the building that hasn't been painted with something, right? When it was done, Frida and the Fridos handed out flyers, and their big reveal turned out to be a block party featuring mariachis, fireworks, barbecue, and cameramen clamoring to see Frida and Diego dance the zapateado with their gringo tourists. Tourists.
And by the way, Frida and the Fridos, band name, called it.
Frida and the Fridos, bingo. I love this story too because at one of these parties, there's like a French artist who comes to go and see Frida's kids do their painting, and everybody's dancing, and someone was like, Diego, you got to get this French guy to dance the zapateado. And he goes up to the French guy and he goes, come dance with me. And the French one goes, no, I don't know how to dance. I can't dance anything. I've never danced any Mexican dance in my life. And Diego just pulls out his pistol and points it at him and he goes, I'll teach you.
Jesus.
And the French guy's like, okay. And then he gets up and they all start dancing.
Oh my gosh.
For Frida, however, joy, unfortunately, would almost always be met again with sadness. Her time working full-time at La Esmeralda was cut short as her own health continued to decline. Initially, Frida refused to allow her pain to stop her, so instead of traveling to Mexico City, she encouraged the class to join her at La Casa Azul. The number of children who learned from her dwindled down to just 4. Arturo Garcia Bustos, Guillermo Monroy, the one who wrote that beautiful thing about her, Fanny Rebel, and Arturo Estrada. All of them ended up having a really good art career, by the way.
Wow.
Together, the 4 last Fridos would gather together for critiques that felt more like parties, since Frida would have food and drinks ready every time they met. But even that became too much to bear.
With Plan B emergency contraception, we're in control of our future. It's backup birth control you take after unprotected sex that helps prevent pregnancy before it starts. It works by temporarily delaying ovulation, and it won't impact your future fertility. Plan B is available in all 50 U.S. states at all major retailers near you, with no ID, prescription, or age requirement needed. Together, we've got this. Follow Plan B on Insta at Plan B One Step to learn more. Use as directed.
By the end of her life, Frida would end up wearing 28 reconstructive corsets for her spine. And in 1944, her Mexican doctors instructed her to wear one made of steel in order to keep her spinal nerves from rubbing together with irritation. By then, Frida had no appetite, dealt with constant fainting and lightheadedness, and had lost 13 more pounds on an already very thin frame. Jeez. Yeah. Another doctor, after thorough examination, concluded that Frida had contracted syphilis, and as a result, she would be administered blood transfusions and a bismuth treatment. I don't know what a bismuth treatment is, but it can't be good.
Also, I wonder where she contracted syphilis from.
Yeah. How'd that get in there?
Oh, gosh. Fucking Diego.
I know, dude. By 1945, Frida no longer fit her steel cast, so her torso was once again mummified in plaster. During a spinal tap, Frida had also received a dose of Lipidol, which inadvertently made its way into her skull, leaving her with pounding headaches. So they put an injection in there, and it's supposed to, hang out in there, and they're supposed to be able to extract it. But when they did the x-ray, they found out that it went up the spine and into her skull.
Jeez.
While she was working with some of the best doctors she could find, their solutions left her in pain and downright pissed off. For instance, after a botched plastering job, Frida got so frustrated by its construction that she had it removed, instead electing to tie herself to the back of a chair while she was painting instead. Wow. In another instance, friends were shocked to find Frida attached to the ceiling with steel rings, her feet barely touching the ground as she painted, or even being stretched out with heavy bags of sand tied to her legs.
Jeez.
Right? The doctors are like, if your vertebrae rub against one another, that's where you're getting the pain. So Frida's like, okay, how the hell do I fix that? So she starts suspending herself from the ceiling, or literally stretching herself out like a torture device, right? Just because this pain has gotten insane, right? A friend, Adelina Sendejas, recalls seeing her in the apparatus, quote, "We were horrified. She was painting and telling funny stories, and when she got too tired and couldn't stand any longer, they lowered her with this apparatus and laid her in bed." One of the most terrifying instances of Frida's Victor Frankenstein-like treatments happened when a concert pianist, El Arose, came to visit. That night, a less experienced doctor had molded her plaster corset in the middle of the night, and El recalls, quote, "About 4:30 or 5 in the morning, I heard crying, nearly shrieks. I jumped out of the bed and went in, and there was Frida, and she couldn't breathe. The corset had hardened, but it hardened so much that it pressed her lungs. I tried to find a doctor, but nobody would pay any attention to her that hour in the morning, so I finally took a razor blade and knelt on her bed over Frida. I began slowly cutting the corset over her, making a 2-inch cut so that she could actually breathe."
Jeez,
right?
Dude. That's
the
brutal.
Frequency... Yeah, it's absolutely insane, right? 28 corsets. Could you even imagine?
And I'm curious. I mean, it feels like this would be the perfect time in history for somebody who's going through this to, justifiably become addicted to something like morphine. Was that not the case, or are we going to get there?
We're going to get there.
Okay.
We're going to get there. Right now, tequila is doing it for her. She's definitely taking a little bit of Demerol here and there, like a little bit of opiates, but we haven't gotten into the full swing of things. Frida's a tough bird. Like, this would be enough to get me to be like, fuck it, take me out, But
100%.
But she's already been dealing with this since she was a kid, right? The frequency of her surgeries, adjustments, infections, and corsets started to truly take a toll on Frida psychologically, presenting themselves in paintings such as Without Hope, The Little Deer, and most famously, The Broken Column, where Frida paints herself stripped down with a deep gouge in the center of her chest, revealing a Roman-style column as her spine, which is cracked and crumbling.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
See, this type of painting is way more, I immediately you get it, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I mean, I know it's a little bit more obvious that it's like, oh, here's a woman who's wearing braces around her chest.
Yeah.
And then she's got a cracking column running through her spine. You're like, got it. Like,
got it.
It's a little bit more obvious.
It's overt. Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe that's why I like it a little bit more. It's because it's,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not though. It's complicated. Frida's complicated.
Frida's complicated
in many,
folks.
many ways.
Yeah, man. Some surgeries provided her with relief, giving her a few months to live outside of her room, but most just became ineffective. In fact, her friend, Dr. Eloesser, even suspected that Frida became slightly addicted to surgery, hoping that the next one would fix her over and over again. And this is actually a pretty common thing that happens with folks who deal with chronic illness, is they're like, I know that I can't just diet and exercise my way out of this. I know that even standing up hurts, so shit, just put me under the knife until you fix me. Like, I don't care anymore. Like, who's the next doctor? Who's got the next idea? What should we do next? You know? And that this kind of became a bit of an issue. And
I feel like
Frida would...
Kim Kardashian is the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure Frida would have got along swimmingly. That would be hilarious, by the way. That would be a hilarious... what's the opposite of a meet cute?
I do wonder. It's like, I honestly feel like Kim Kardashian would go up to Frida being like, I'm just like the biggest fan of your work. Oh my God,
I'm
it's
so inspired
great.
by you. And Frida would be like, get like, away from me.
I think she would have slapped her across the face and just been like, I never want to talk to you again.
Frida would eventually fall under the care of full-time of Dr. Faril, a leading bone surgeon at the English hospital in Mexico City. There, it was revealed that the toes on her bad foot had turned black due to lack of circulation, and Frida's back would be operated on once again, this time hoping to graft new bones onto her spinal column. Fun fact, the bones that she had grafted came from a donor whose name was Francisco Villa. It's not actually Pancho Villa, but she was like, oh, when I get this new bone, I'll be out of here shooting pistols. I'll be shooting my way out of this hospital, right? The most heartbreaking account of this time would be from Frida's older sister, Matita, who would write to Dr. Eloesser in her stead. Quote, she wants me to tell you everything that has to do with her operation, and I do it with pleasure, in spite the fact that telling you of it carries horrors suffered, and that until today, no progress had been seen. She has been through a real Calvary, and I don't know how this thing will go since they fused 3 vertebrae with the bone of I don't know who, and the first 11 days were something terrifying to her. Her intestines became paralyzed. She had a temperature of 39.5, which is 103 for us Americans, every day since they operated on her. Constant vomiting and pains in her spine. To calm her, the doctors gave her a double injection of Demerol and other things, with the exception of morphine, because she can't tolerate it. Her temperature continued, and she began to suffer with pains in her sick leg. The fever didn't stop, and I noticed that she was emitting a very bad odor from her back. I pointed it out to the doctor, and the next day they opened up the corset and found an abscess or tumor, all infected in the wound, and they had to operate once more. After 4 or 5 days, the corset is as dirty as a pigsty since she's secreting through her back, and these señores say that the wound is not closing and the poor child is their victim. Dr. Eloesser, I think, without Frida's knowing it, that the infection is not superficial, but rather that the grafted bone has not stuck onto the vertebrae, and this has infected everything. The way I see her suffering, I would like to give her my life, but those señores say all the same that it's going well and that she'll come out well, but I hesitate to say to you, without knowing about medicine, I know that Frida is not well.
I don't like medical anything.
Yeah.
And that, even just imagining that right now is just like nauseating, dude.
Yeah, I could never be a doctor because, I mean, I like what's crazy too is like they continued to put the corsets on her and they had to just leave a hole in the back of the corset so the abscess could breathe. And she would just like show people, and she basically just had an open wound looking into her body from her back.
That is so freaking gnarly, dude. Ugh.
Yeah. As if Frida hadn't had enough of being locked up in a hospital, she would also spend around 2 years under Dr. Faril's care, but she refused to have her stay be as somber as it was after her crash. Instead of solemn letters begging people to visit, Frida turned her hospital bedroom into a fiesta, decorating her walls with art from friends and students, even going so far as to rent a projector to have movie nights, where her friends would make mole and sit around her to watch Charlie Chaplin.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, pretty cute. She liked Charlie Chaplin. She liked all like the goofy guys, like she liked all the Charlie Chaplin and
Buster
like Three
Keaton.
Stooges and Buster Keaton. Like those were her favorites, right?
Nice.
Diego even did his part to keep her company, staying with her 6 days a week, sometimes going so far as dancing around with a tambourine, pretending to be a circus bear just to make her laugh.
Oh, he finally did something good.
I know.
I was waiting for you to be like, Diego couldn't be bothered, and there were a lot of parades going on, so he just left her.
He noticed that one of the nurses looked pretty cool, and he basically fucked off for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
No. As much as Frida deeply convened with her pain, she also violently resisted her pain's ability to diminish her soul. It's kind of this weird, I don't know, opposite world where like she, in her paintings, is like very personal and confronts her pain very head on, but also she's like, I refuse to be what she would always say, which is kind of mean, but she's like, I refuse to be just some whining old lady, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to be lively, I want to be participated with my people. So like she's like, fuck it, if we have to turn this hospital room into a circus in order to have people to come over and hang out with me and not just feel sad for me, that's what she's gonna do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always right. Like her life fluctuated between ideations of suicide and a disgust at the very thought of letting death take her. When Frida returned home, her life was more or less the same. Her sister Cristina, who she affectionately called Chaparrita, the chubby one, took on the role of head nurse at La Casa Azul, attending to her when she got injections, braiding her hair away from her face, and managing the household in her stead. Walking more than a block was essentially off the table now. So when Frida went out during that time, she was often driven up right to the markets, where she'd order a double shot of tequila to lighten her feet as she visited her favorite shopkeepers again. Frida, refusing to become an agoraphobe, would force herself to go out with Diego and the rest, laughing as she'd watch him and the rest dance the night away while she had to sit down. Another way Frida enriched her life as her health began to fade was through politics. As I mentioned before, World War II provided Stalin with a political makeover in the media after Russia's hard-earned victory against the Nazis, which pushed Frida to rejoin the main Communist Party officially, although her focus above everything was on peace. From her bed, Frida did what she could to accrue signatures for the Stockholm Appeal, which called for nuclear disarmament to prevent another atom bomb from ever dropping again. As a result of her new commitment to the revolution, many of the final paintings in Frida's life changed their theme. Worried about the selfish nature of her art so far, Frida spent her time at the easel devoting her work to Marxist themes and ideals. Frida's work in the 1950s, sadly, had a style that was representative of her state. As her stamina became worse and worse, what were once careful layers of depth became frantic brushstrokes, and the sedative effects of her new drug regimen leached the color out of a palette that was once so vibrant. It's really interesting. If you look at some of her later, like, still life paintings of, like, fruit and all of this, it's just all grayscale. And these paintings, like, you can see each individual brushstroke versus if you look at, Doña Rosita, which we looked at earlier, that was like much more picture-like, much more realistic. Here, she's like, I've got to move quickly. Like, and she also felt kind of, like I said, guilty. A lot of her paintings were introspective, and now she's looking basically towards the end of her life. And she's thinking, you know, I've always said that I was a revolutionary, but I didn't put my best skill, my art, towards the revolution. So now, like, a lot of her paintings are like sort of frantic paintings about Marxism, about progressivism, that sort of thing. It was clear to many that she was in the sunset of her life, even if the doctors still believed that she would pull through. As a result, in the spring of 1953, Lola Alvarez Bravo decided to arrange an exhibition for Frida at La Galería Contemporánea for that same year. Senora Bravo recalled the moment, quote, "I realized that Frida's death was quite near. I think that the honors should be given to people while they're still alive to enjoy them, not when they're dead." This would be Frida's very first solo exhibition in her home country, and the prospect of showing her work to all of Mexico energized her and improved her health in the months following the opening night. Unfortunately, like anyone with severe illness knows, energy was a precious resource. And on the day before her gallery was set to open, Frida became so ill that her doctors forbade her from moving at all. Oddly enough, the rumors of Frida not attending attracted more and more attention. Gallery attendants were getting calls for hours from the Mexican, American, and even European numbers of journalists asking whether or not Frida would be well enough to attend. The night of Frida's solo exhibition had arrived, and the gallerists were subject to even more unusual behavior. Looking out the locked doors, staff were shocked to see a crowd had formed and begun to even rattle the doors. The commotion grew louder and louder, so as a result, Senora Bravo let them in early for fear of them breaking them down. As collectors, movie stars, painters, and peasants stormed the gallery, hoping to see Frida for what they thought would be the last time, they were disappointed. Until, out from the street, the sirens of an ambulance approached. There, being carried in on a stretcher, was Frida Kahlo, resplendent in her Tijuana outfit. Frida had kept her promise to the doctors not to move, instead having her four-post bed, decorated with Judas figures, placed in the center of the gallery, as if she was a part of the exhibit itself.
It's cool, dude. It's like
so cool.
It feels
right?
like performance art or something, you know?
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of where they start to end the movie of Frida in the Salma Hayek movie, and it's such a good place to, like, you know, finish it off with a bang, right?
Yeah.
From the comfort of her mattress, Frida held court as the queen of the delinquents, the hopeless, and the revolutionaries. Eclectic painters of Mexico, such as Goitia and Dr. Adel, were moved by her presence, offering her poetry and singing corridos with her. Her old pals, the cachuchas, would reminisce with her about the old days, only to be pushed back into the crowd by more admirers. Onlookers mentioned that the disabled of Mexico all came to greet and kiss her, as if she was a saint to pray to for health. And even her little Fridos, all grown up, came by to soothe her as the gallery filled up with people.
Little Fritos.
I know. It's like, this is like getting me misty-eyed. The crowds became so massive that at some point Frida in her bed had to be carried outside like Cleopatra just for her to get fresh air. Photographers flashed away, food was served, tequila was poured by the leader, and when Frida's doctors told Diego that she needed to go home, he tapped the side of his pistol, saying, quote, "Beat it, kid, or I'll let you have it." The exhibition was such a smash hit, the gallery had no choice but to cancel their next show in order to keep it up for another month.
Wow.
For many, this felt like saying goodbye to Mexico's most precious flower. But, as always with Frida, there was a bit more pain to be had. Later that year, during a routine examination of her bad leg, Frida would learn the luckless news that her doctors would have to amputate the leg completely. To her friends, Frida made a joke of it, saying, quote, "Look at your faces. It's as if there was a tragedy. What tragedy? They're going to cut off my pata. So what?" But to her very closest friends and to Diego, she was horrified. This leg, which had given her trouble since she was a kid, sick with polio, had given her nothing but pain. She was called peg-legged, walked with a limp, wore extra socks to hide it, dealt with infections. She even amputated toes to keep it a few years before. But now the fight was over, and she had to leave behind a physical part of herself.
Jeez.
For the last year of her life, Frida wore a prosthetic meant to look like a red lace-up boot under her long dresses. And the new leg gave the opportunity for her to move around, but only for so long. In 1954, Frida participated in a demonstration against the CIA's orchestrating of an overthrow of a democratically elected leftist president in Guatemala. Jacobo Arbenz, who won by popular vote, was on the path to expel American ownership of Guatemalan farming, but seeing that it was bad for business, the CIA instead staged a coup, placing dictator Castillo Armas in power. In an outrage, Frida went out marching. But her health, despite the amputation, was still just as bad. Truth is, Frida was already dealing with daily fevers and infections on other parts of her body, and a sick person is never the ideal candidate for someone as going through something as involved as an amputation, right? Even her sister writes in one of the letters where she's like, I know Frida wants this amputation, but like, unless her fevers get better, she really shouldn't have it. But it was also sort of a catch-22 where it's like, if she keeps the leg, her infection will get worse and then her fevers will get worse. So she's like, do I cut it off while I'm still sick and then deal with really bad healing process? Or do I try to keep it for as long as possible in the hopes of getting better? And then the sick leg makes me worse. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. It's brutal.
Yeah. Slowly, the final years of Frida's life became a dim view of what it used to be. The doctors had prescribed her a half-dozen opioids to stave off pain, most especially Demerol. As the pain got worse and worse, Frida couldn't stand to take the prescribed dose, instead mixing up injections with whatever she could get her hands on, which wasn't much, seeing that the couple's finances were running dry.
Ugh.
When the pills weren't covering all of her pain, Frida chose to swallow them down with tequila as well. In my opinion, it wasn't just the physical pain that led to Frida's last day. As she became more and more sick, Frida changed. Her mind constantly plagued with pain and infection. She was a hollow version of herself, known for screaming at friends or throwing glasses across her room. Not able to handle Frida's change in disposition, Diego began to avoid her, only checking in when it was necessary. Instead of breakfast with Frida, he was in his San Angel studio, infatuated with his agent, Emma Hurtado. Frida, instead, would spend more time with her nurses and the few cachuchas who came to visit her. One of them, Manuel Gomez Ramirez, recalls seeing her just before her death. Quote, "It was not awkward to speak of her death because Frida wasn't afraid of it. What did worry her, though, was the thought of being lowered into the ground in a recumbent position. She had suffered so often in so many hospitals that she did not want to go to the grave lying down. For this reason, she asked to be cremated." In her journals, Frida would paint an angel dressed in black, writing, quote, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope to never come back. Frida."
Dang.
On Tuesday, July 13th, 1954, Frida would draw her final breath. Her exact cause of death remains a mystery. According to the medical documents, Frida suffered a pulmonary embolism in the small hours of the morning. Some speculate that Frida's death was a suicide, likely as a result of Diego's continued cheating despite her illness, while others speculate that it might have been accidental, due to her mixing of medications in high doses. My guess is it's something in between. The silence that followed her death sent a ripple across Mexico, and soon people flooded La Casa Azul, the very place she was born, to see her dead. Those who tried to console Diego were met with slammed doors. He spoke to no one and entertained no guests in the days following her death. Instead, like a solemn pallbearer, Frida's flawed husband orchestrated a funeral march fit for a queen. Draped with a hammer and sickle, Frida's casket was marched to the Palace of Fine Arts, where bearers attended to her body as if it was a tomb of the unknown soldier. The current administration was furious to find the Soviet flag displayed in a public museum, but former President Cardenas, the same one who aided Trotsky, stood over her body, so there was nothing the museum could do. Following her grand procession, Frida's final wish to be cremated was granted at La Panteón Civil de Dolores, which is like their national cemetery, where onlookers swore that they saw Frida give one last seductive smile as her body went up in flames. Her ashes can still be found at La Casa Azul, which now serves as Frida's museum.
Very cool.
As for the Dove's elephant, Diego Rivera, he would go on to marry the same agent he cheated on Frida with before she died.
Shocker.
Yep. A year and 2 weeks after her death, in fact.
Yeah,
a year is at least, polite.
At first I heard you say 2 weeks after her death, and I was like, oh no, it's a year and 2 weeks.
Yeah. In his memoirs, however, Diego makes no mistake that Frida was the greatest love he had ever known, and that it was clear to all that Diego, without Frida, was an empty husk of a man. He would die only 3 years after Frida's death.
Oh, wow.
While his final request was to have her ashes mixed with his, the Mexican government would instead give him his own memorial at the same cemetery.
Okay.
And thus ends the story of the elephant and the dove, but not the story of Frida. While Diego Rivera's art is still appreciated by some Mexicans and many art historians, Frida Kahlo's alegría would only grow in size after her death. By the 1970s, Frida mania had taken the art world when feminist scholars dug into overlooked non-Western female artists. Now considered one of the most important artists of the 20th century, especially of the Western world, Frida's work would soar to new heights that Diego's lumbering shadow would have never allowed. Mexico would consider her art as part of their cultural heritage, banning the sale of many of her greatest paintings, which only made the ones that were still on the market more valuable. In a move that would have had Frida's communist side rolling in her grave, one of her last paintings, called El Sueño, would auction off for $54.7 million in November of 2025, making her the most valued Latin American artist of all time.
I thought it was even female artist.
Perhaps female, but I know for certain Latin American.
Yeah, that's insane.
Her image became the face of the Chicano movement, continuing her love for La Raza far past her death, while feminist, Latina, and queer communities would produce books and art in admiration for a life well lived. For the disabled community, Frida represents a violent revolt against death and a refusal to live the secluded life that disability often brings. Now, a day doesn't go by where someone, somewhere, hears her story, buys her art, or falls in love with her alluring personality. So, the next time you find yourself at a party amongst the outcasts, the degenerates, or the rebellious, or the next time you realize that you can't stand the handful of rich assholes who make it worse for the rest of us, or perhaps you're fed up with feeling like you're dying slowly and you want to live fast instead, raise a glass to Frida, patron saint of the atheists, the weirdos, the revolutionaries, and those who refuse death. And that is where we'll pick up for our next season.
Awesome, dude. I mean, fantastic. I have said this from the very beginning that I knew zero about Frida, and I cannot walk away saying it's my new favorite of your series, but I can say that it was utterly fascinating and gave me a completely new perspective on Frida Kahlo.
Same here, man. Same here. This pushed me in a way. It gave me insight into an avenue of interests that didn't really align with me very much. I wasn't a huge fan of modern art. I wasn't a huge fan of particularly Frida's art. Of surrealism. I didn't understand surrealism. I had been, like many people, who think that like modern art is kind of silly. I kind of had the same opinion.
Sure.
And what I love about doing these biographies is by walking in somebody's footsteps, I can see somebody's perspective and why they would love something that they love.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
One of my favorite joys of just living life is seeing another person passionate about something, even if it's not something that I'm particularly passionate about. When you hear somebody talk about their favorite sport or their favorite type of music, or go on and on about their favorite show. Those are those moments that I really live for, and going through Frida kind of gave me a new perspective on something, like I said, I wouldn't have ever really crossed into.
Totally.
If it wasn't for, Hayden Herrera's book or Gavi, asking me to do this, right?
For sure. No, I tend to agree that a lot of modern art I don't generally connect with. And I can't even, I'd be lying if I walked away saying that like, oh, now I love Frida's art and I just want to go absorb it all day long. I don't, It's like, I think everybody got that as a pretty clear picture of like, I have a new appreciation for it. When you explain it to me, I really enjoy it. But I also have found that is how I am with a lot of art in general. I remember when I was in college and I took art history classes, it was some of my favorite classes I ever took because, especially when it came to like Renaissance art and medieval art and all this kind of stuff, you could actually learn that, a color wasn't just a color. It was like purple was generally reserved for royalty. So if you saw one of those older paintings and somebody was in purple, you knew that they were royalty. And there were just like little tricks and hints that you would learn that made you appreciate things even more. So I would even say in that essence, Frida created almost like a new rule book of her very own, right? To be like, you're probably not going to get this. I have meaning and reason to it, but then also at the same time, I wonder if half of her intention was not to even be understood, but to make you look at it and go, what is she actually trying to say? And she's like, I'm trying to say a lot, and I'm also trying to say nothing at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I totally get it. And I mean, Herrera talks about this too, where it's like, for Frida, who she was as a person was as much of an exhibition of her art as her actual paintings were. Like, it's kind of like when we talked about Da Vinci, where we were like, his drawings weren't enough to express who Da Vinci was as a person, because he was also a performer and he did stagecraft and he made weapons and he did all of these things. But because history has sort of filtered out the live action version of him, we now see him as this very intellectual, kind of serious guy. Frida was kind of similar, right? Like her art is massively important to who she was as a person, but who she was as a person was just as important, right? It wasn't like Michelangelo where he was an artist and he devoted every fiber of his being to that creation. Or Diego was the same way, right? Frida was a really rounded person who had all of these varying interests and wanted you to be enticed, allured, curious about her.
Yeah.
And I think she did that successfully for me. Like I kind of saw Frida as, you know what, maybe during office hours I'll talk about it, but there was a certain point when I was writing this season where I just couldn't get along with the character, so to speak. Right? Like I didn't understand her very well. I saw her as I don't even want to make accusations, but I felt like she was kind of morbid and a little whiny and negative and also like try to manipulate people into feeling a certain way about her. So what I did was I stopped writing the script entirely and I started writing why I don't like Frida. And maybe during office hours, I'll share that, because it kind of came around to this very beautiful moment of understanding what she means to people, what she was trying to convey through her life, through her experience, through the performance that was Frida Kahlo. And I gained a new appreciation for her through that. So, it was a really great challenge to go out of my comfort zone and not do nerdy guy who invents thing, right?
Or even somebody that you were naturally drawn to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right?
No, I completely feel that.
I think as a treat, my next one is going to be someone I'm naturally drawn to. But
yeah, it
was good to push myself.
That's actually probably a pretty good segue to announce the next series as well.
Let's do it.
Which is, so for me, I was not naturally drawn to this person either. So I had kind of said to you that I wanted to do somebody from very far back in history, first of all. I wanted to, because my zone of interest is definitely the 1800s and early to mid 1900s. That's just what my soul wants to get into. I love the, sort of revolutionary / enlightenment / industrial revolution stuff. It's totally where I want to go. And so I was like, I don't want to keep sticking to this. I want to go back further. I want to like go into areas I've never gone before. But the tricky situation was, the further back you go, the worse everything gets. If anybody has read the book Project Hail Mary, they don't talk about it in the movie, but in the book, there's a point where one of the characters talks about history and how she's like, the further back you go in history, the worse things get. and we take for granted how great things really are right now and how good most people actually are, you know?
Yeah.
And that was really one of my biggest struggles, is the further back that I went, and I wanted to do a woman from history very specifically because I haven't done a woman since Marilyn Monroe. And I was like, let's go and find somebody. And there were a couple characters that I was looking at that were just like, good Lord, you may have done some cool stuff, but like you were.
I remember who exactly you're talking about.
Yeah. I can say it because I might do it in the future, but it won't be for probably a couple of years. It was this warlord woman from Africa named Njinga. And I won't share with you.
It was some Dan Carlin shit, man. It was some hardcore history.
Man, it was some of the worst stuff I've ever heard a human has done. And it was just like, Akiva, you and I had this conversation of should we even give this person the time? Because we have this, you said it aptly, you were like, it's a smorgasbord of cool people to talk about.
Yeah.
So I ended up looking through a different number of characters, and I actually ended up landing on someone who, I won't lie, there is going to be brutality. There's going to be some very unsavory moments or whatever.
Ancient history, man. That's how it goes.
And honestly, that's just how it's going to be. I'm learning that it's to find a mixture of somebody who's both interesting and important
Admirable,
and a woman is like, man, there are some women that were like, oh, well, they were a scholar, but it's like, there's not a ton recorded about their life, and they were just kind of boring. Like, there's just
most people, unfortunately, didn't write a lot about women at that time.
So, who I am doing next, first of all, we are going all the way back to the 7th century, which the earliest we've gone prior to this is Da Vinci, who was the 1400s, right? So yeah, we're going all the way back to the 600s, and we're also going to a part of the world that we've never gone to before, which is China. So for the next subject we're covering is a woman named Wu Zhao. And I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Zhao, Z-H-A-O. There's sort of a westernized version that's Chow, but boy, the Chinese language is complicated, and there's a lot of Western versions and actual versions and all this kind of stuff, so I'm going to do my absolute best. But Wu Zhao was and is a fascinating character. Ancient China, really more accurately, medieval China at the time, was an unbelievably interesting place with tons of complexity and invention and modernization and all this stuff that I just had no idea about. But what makes Wu Zhao so interesting was that she actually started out her life as a concubine. So she was recruited to be a concubine to the emperor and slowly made her way to becoming the only woman emperor in the history of China. Incredible. So we're not even talking about empress, right? Because she did become empress, but then she actually became the emperor of China. Wow. And she was the only woman in Chinese history to ever have done so. She was a singular dynasty. Nobody else carried out her actual lineage. Dynasty, which as emperor, just like with English royalty, they changed their names. The Chinese did the same. So her name was Wu Zhao. When she became emperor, she became Wu Zishen. So she was part of, I think they call it the Zhen dynasty. I'll have to double check on that because I'm still doing a lot of my research, whatever. I'm like 4 episodes deep into the writing though. So anyways, it's genuinely fascinating stuff. And it's not even just like her life, all of the surrounding stuff that was happening in China, what China was actually doing. And it's like, I don't know anybody else feels this like I did, but I remember in school, people being like, man, the Chinese invented everything. Like fireworks, the Chinese invented fireworks. Guns, they invented guns. And I remember being like, oh, neat. And then reading through this is like, oh, no. You invented actually everything. You invented modern society. You invented city planning. You invented politics. You basically invented democracy in your own sort of way. The Greeks technically did, but like the way that the Chinese actually established it wasn't democracy, but there were democratic elements and how they parsed things out. I think this will also be good because for most of the American listeners, Eastern history is a month or two in the American education system. We typically start in Sumeria, right? We start with like Mesopotamia, then go to the Greeks, then we go to like the medieval times with like England and Spain and Germany for like 5 seconds, and then we go straight to American history, and we do that for the rest of history class, right? China is
a footnote in most people's education. I know it is for me. So this is going to be really fascinating. I've always been interested in Eastern history. It's just not something that, like I said, I've been exposed to a lot. So
yeah, and same. And I think it was 7th grade where we mostly focused on Chinese history. And a lot of it was just sort of like, well, there was the Qing dynasty and then the Qing dynasty and then the Sui dynasty. And each are defined by this and this and this. And it was just these very sort of boring,
general
broad
factoids,
strokes. Yeah, of like, here's generally how you can identify this dynasty in this period of time, and here's who the emperor was. But actually going through it in the life of a person, man, it's awesome. And I am telling you guys right now, I have never read anything that is more like Game of Thrones in my entire life.
Yeah?
It is, and I'm talking like true to form Game of Thrones of like, oh, so-and-so just murdered that person to do this thing because they knew that that person was going to go over here and do that. So they made this move to do that. Like, it is a chess game of brutality that is going on in so many ways, but then interspersed with like actually amazing political action and progress and all this kind of crazy stuff. I'll also give the warning. I'm going to do it both at the beginning of, I think it's like the 2nd episode that I get into, but I'll give the broad warning now that like it is horny. It is the horniest series I've ever read about. Like, holy cow, the amount of sex these people were having and the amount of detail they wrote about it is like, I had no clue how.
It's got to be something similar to like Roman history with that too. Like, just like completely unhinged sexual deviance just going everywhere.
Oh yeah. And I'm even like, you'll hear me, going through the series or whatever, I'm even taming it down and like giving details and not getting as explicit as what's written. I mean, if people get mad and are like, no, we want to hear it, like we could try to go through some of it in office hours, and I'm going to touch onto it here and there, but like, I'm trying to like, we try to make it dinner table appropriate. And even what I'm getting into is going to be a little,
we're now like bar appropriate.
That's fair. That's fair.
Like,
but anyways, so yes, Wu Zhao, that is who we are doing next as the series. I'm really excited. It has been really, really fascinating to go through. I will say I do feel a little bit bad because normally, like we said, we like to cover very, very good people in history. I cannot qualify Wu Zhao as a good person. But what I can say is that in a time where, and we'll get into it, man, in a time where women were genuinely disposable, is how the culture basically viewed them 99% of the time. The credit we can give is you did something, Wu Zhao, that nobody even thought possible. And the methods that you had to employ to get there, yes, they're not good a lot of times, but like any man at the time would have done the exact same things to get there. So
we actually had the same conversation with Frida. I had this with my sister where it was like, I was complaining about these different aspects of Frida's personality, and she's like, how many countless amounts of men have been flippant towards their, sexual enterprises, have been rude to people and said these things to people and like, treated people like they were pawns. And I was like, touche. Yeah. Touche. So before you start judging Wu Zhao or Frida, maybe like think like, is there a guy that you really like who did this stuff too? Yeah.
For sure. And again, I don't want to give all of it away. I've given very little away, but it is going to be an utterly fascinating series. And again, I'm excited to go not only super far back in history, but to go into a part of the world that I knew little about. And I would imagine many folks out there, especially in America, know very little about as well. So yeah.
Man,
we're even like, and I'll talk about it too. It's like China was doing stuff that was like, if you went over to Europe, you'd be like, what are you people doing crawling around in the fucking mud over here? And China was like, no, we're designing new cities. It like actually genuinely designing new cities. Like, wicked cool stuff. Really, really, really
couldn't even comprehend the level of sophistication that they had at the time.
Oh, yeah. And we're talking about like a fully literate society, too.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of Chinese folks are extremely proud of their history because not only is it very well recorded, as I'm sure you've realized, but it's so long and so super massive. Like the population size, the civic size, the historical database of the Chinese like history books makes European history look hilariously small and petty.
It genuinely does. I mean, yeah, the Chinese, it has been really, really illuminating to see how just deep their history goes, and well recorded. You said, I mean, there are genuine quotes we have from Wu Zhao from the 600s.
That's
like
insane.
It's amazing, you know? So yeah, we'll get into it, and I'm just really excited to share it with everybody. So hopefully we'll get into it.
Let's do it, man.
Awesome. Well, Akiva, obviously amazing series. I hope everybody out there who has gotten through this series got out of it what I got out of it. Probably even more, to be honest with you. I would imagine there's a lot of folks out there that closely identify with many elements of Frida's life. So I hope it brought you joy and comfort and just illuminated a little bit more about Frida herself. Amazing job, man. Like always.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man.
All right, everybody. Well, we will wrap up here. We have been going for a little while, but again, hopefully you all enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, corrections, if you are curious about contacting us about that logo art we were talking about at the beginning of the episode here, you can shoot us an email at thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com. If you feel like supporting us on Patreon, you can do so by going to patreon.com/thebiographers. We'd appreciate any support you can give us. And then also, if you feel like giving us a nice little review somewhere, we'd appreciate that as well. As always, what do you got for us in the world of metal, Akiva?
Well, I have a couple of new knives on the website. If you go to metalworkbymiola.com and use the code biographers at checkout, you're going to get 10% off of your order. These days, however, I'm spending a lot more time teaching. So if you find yourself in Colorado, specifically Denver, and you want to learn how to make a knife, please check out Hardy and Fuller. I teach basically, 2 or 3 times every week. We got all sorts of classes ranging from total beginner classes all the way to some more advanced stuff. So if you want to talk about history, you want to learn a little bit about knife making, go to hardyandfuller.com and book a class with me.
Beautiful.
That's about it.
Well, cool. Again, thanks everybody so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the series. We'll see you in 2 weeks from now. Genuinely, we will see you. If you want to see us anyways, we're going to be on YouTube actually doing the video recording, so you can watch us there. Or if you just prefer to listen to us, you can do that as well. So we'll see you in 2 weeks for office hours, and then 2 weeks after that, we're going to be starting up our series on Wu Zhao. Otherwise, hope you're having a great week, and do remember, like always, ignorance is not stupidity. It is the absence of knowledge. And I do hope you all learned something today.
See ya!
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.